The lights were too bright and too cold. Maya Redfeather stood on the raised platform with her hands bound in glowing blue chains that hummed with energy. The chains were not made of metal but of something else, something that burned when she tried to pull against them. She had stopped trying hours ago. Around her neck was a collar that would shock her if she moved too far from her spot. She had learned that lesson quickly. The auction hall was massive, built into the side of an orbital station that floated above a planet she did not know. Through the transparent walls she could see stars in the curve of a world below. It was beautiful in a way that made her heart ache. She had grown up under open skies on New Arizona, a frontier colony where the desert stretched for miles and the air smelled like sage and dust. This place smelled like chemicals and recycled air. Maya was not alone on the platform. There were 12 other humans standing in chains, all of them from the colony. Some were crying. Some had given up and stood with their heads down and their shoulders bent. Maya refused to bow. She kept her chin up and her eyes forward, even though every part of her body hurt. The slavers had not been gentle when they took her from her home. The slavers were called the Krell. They were tall creatures covered in scales that shimmered green and black under the lights. Their eyes were yellow with vertical pupils like a snake. When they spoke their language, it sounded like hissing and clicking. Maya hated them with every breath she took. The auction master was a Krell named Voss. He was larger than the others and wore robes that marked him as important. He walked up and down the line of humans, pointing at them and speaking in the trade language that most species used. Maya had learned some of it during her weeks in captivity. She understood enough to know what he was saying about her. Voss told the crowd that she was young and strong. He said she came from a warrior culture on her world. He said she would make an excellent servant for the right buyer. The crowd of aliens sitting in the viewing seats made noises that might have been interest or amusement. Maya could not tell and did not care. She thought about her grandmother. Her grandmother had been born on Earth in the old Apache lands before the family moved to the stars. She had taught Maya the old stories and the old prayers. She had taught her that the Apache people had survived everything that tried to break them. Conquistadors and cavalry, reservations and relocation. They had survived it all. Maya whispered one of those prayers now under her breath. The words were quiet, but they gave her strength. Voss moved to stand beside Maya. He grabbed her chin roughly and turned her head from side to side so the buyers could see her face. Maya wanted to bite his scaled hand, but the collar would punish her. Instead, she looked directly into his yellow eyes and did not blink. Voss made an annoyed sound and released her. He announced that the bidding would begin. A screen appeared in the air above the platform showing numbers that climbed higher and higher. Maya watched as aliens she could not name bid on her like she was livestock. The numbers kept rising. She realized that she must be worth something to these creatures, though she could not imagine what. The bidding slowed and then stopped. The winner was a Krell who sat in a private box high above the main floor. Maya could see him through the transparent walls of his viewing area. He was draped in rich fabrics and jewelry. His scales were polished to shine. He looked pleased with himself as he gestured to his servants. Voss announced the sale as final. The Krell noble's name was Zarth. Maya repeated it in her mind so she would not forget. If she ever got the chance, she would make him regret buying her. Guards came to take her off the platform. They were Krell soldiers wearing armor and carrying weapons that glowed with energy. They deactivated her platform collar but kept her wrist chains active. One of them pushed her forward. Maya stumbled but caught herself. She would not fall in front of them. They led her through corridors of the station. She tried to memorize the path, but there were too many turns and too many doors. Everything looked the same, all metal and lights and sterile surfaces. They passed windows that showed the vastness of space, and she felt a deep longing for home. The guards brought her to a holding area where other recently purchased slaves waited. There were species she had never seen before. Some looked almost human. Others were completely alien. All of them wore chains. All of them had the same look in their eyes, a mixture of fear and resignation. Maya was placed in a small cell with a force field across the entrance. Inside was a bench and nothing else. She sat down and examined her chains. They were seamless, with no lock or clasp that she could see. The energy that bound them together was controlled remotely. She had watched the guards activate and deactivate them with small devices they carried. She thought about escape. It was all she had thought about since the raid on New Arizona. The Krell had come without warning, their ships appearing in the sky like dark clouds. They had weapons that stunned rather than killed because they wanted captives. Maya had fought them. She had used her rifle until it ran out of power, and then she had used her hands. It had not been enough. The memory made her angry, and anger was better than despair. She stood up and paced the small cell. Her grandmother had told her stories about the Apache warriors who had fought the cavalry in the old days. They had been outnumbered and outgunned, but they had never stopped fighting. They had used the land and their knowledge and their courage. Maya had the same blood in her veins. She heard footsteps in the corridor. A guard appeared and deactivated the force field. He gestured for her to come out. Maya obeyed because she had no choice yet. The guard led her to a docking area where ships were connected to the station. She was brought aboard a vessel that was clearly expensive. The walls were decorated and the floors were polished. This was Zarth's ship. The guard took her deep into the ship to another holding area. This one was nicer than the cell on the station, but it was still a cell. The guard pushed her inside and reactivated the force field. Then he left without a word. Maya sat down and closed her eyes. She began to pray again in Apache. She asked for strength. She asked for a chance. She promised that if she got free, she would not waste it. The ship's engines rumbled to life beneath her, and she felt the movement as they departed the station. She was being taken somewhere unknown. But wherever it was, Maya Redfeather would not break. She would rather die first. Jack Murphy had been in worse places than this station, but not by much. The orbital platform was a haven for smugglers and slavers, the kind of place where questions were not asked and authorities did not come. He moved through the crowded corridors with his head down and his hat pulled low over his eyes. The hat was old and worn, made from leather that had seen better days. It marked him as human and possibly crazy, since most humans avoided places like this. He wore a long coat that hung to his knees and boots that had walked across a dozen different worlds. On his hip was a weapon that looked like a revolver from old Earth, but fired plasma instead of bullets. People got out of his way when they saw him coming. Jack had a reputation in these parts. He had come to the station for one reason. 3 months ago, the colony of New Arizona had been raided by Krell slavers. Jack had been off-world at the time working a bounty. When he returned, he found the settlement half destroyed and 100 people missing. The colonial authorities had filed complaints and sent diplomatic messages, but nothing came of it. The Krell Dominion did not care about human protests. Jack had been a ranger once, back when the colonies still had law enforcement that meant something. He had worn a badge and tried to keep the peace on the frontier. That was before the corporations took over and the rangers were disbanded. Now he worked as a bounty hunter, tracking down criminals and fugitives for money. But this was different. This was personal. New Arizona had been his home for 5 years. He knew the people there. He had shared meals with them and helped them build their settlement. When he heard about the raid, he felt something break inside him. So he started tracking the slavers. It took him to a dozen stations and cost him every credit he had saved. But he finally found a lead that brought him here. The auction had been advertised on the black market networks. Jack paid an information broker to get him the details. The broker told him that Krell slavers were selling recently acquired humans. Jack knew it had to be the people from New Arizona, so he came to watch and to wait. He stood in the back of the auction hall behind a pillar where he could see but not be seen. The hall was full of buyers from different species. There were Krell, of course, but also others. Jack recognized some of the species, and others were new to him. They all had one thing in common. They all thought it was acceptable to buy and sell sentient beings. Jack watched as human after human was brought onto the platform. He recognized faces. There was old Henry, who ran the general store. There was Claire, who taught the colony children. There was Pete, who worked the water recyclers. Jack memorized each face and noted which buyer purchased them. He would come back for them if he could. Then Maya was brought out, and Jack felt his breath catch. He did not know her personally, but he recognized the tattoo on her wrist. It was the New Arizona colony mark that all settlers received. But it was more than that. Jack saw the way she held herself. She did not bow or bend. She looked at her captors with pure defiance. Jack had seen that look before in old photographs from Earth. It was the look of warriors who refused to surrender. The bidding for Maya was intense. Jack watched as the numbers climbed higher than he could possibly afford. He had maybe 1,000 credits to his name. The winning bid was 100,000. The buyer was a Krell noble named Zarth, who sat in a fancy box overlooking the hall. Jack made note of the name. After the auction ended, Jack made his way to the station's lower levels. This was where the real business happened. He found a bar that catered to criminals and sat in a dark corner. He ordered a drink and waited. Before long, a contact approached him. Her name was Lisa, and she worked as a data broker. She sold information to anyone who could pay. Jack slid half his remaining credits across the table. Lisa made them disappear into her jacket. She leaned forward and spoke quietly. She told him that Zarth's ship was still docked at the station. It would leave in 6 hours. She gave him the docking bay number and the security codes he would need. She also gave him maintenance worker credentials that would get him on board. Jack asked how she got this information so fast. Lisa smiled and said she had been expecting him. Word had spread about a crazy human who was tracking the new Arizona raiders. She said she respected what he was doing even if she thought it was suicide. Jack thanked her and finished his drink. He spent the next 4 hours preparing. He traded his remaining credits and called in favors from other contacts. He got a maintenance uniform that would fool the ship's sensors. He got a better weapon and extra power cells. He got a layout of Zarth's ship showing where the holding cells would be located. He got everything he could because he knew he would only get one chance. Jack thought about the woman he had seen at the auction. Maya Redfeather, the information broker, had called her. Apache heritage, 26 years old, worked as a security officer for the colony before the raid. Jack had not known her, but he knew her type. Fighters. People who would rather die than quit. He made his way to the docking bay as his window of opportunity approached. The maintenance credentials worked perfectly. The guards scanned his identification and waved him through without a second look. Jack walked up the loading ramp into Zarth's ship like he belonged there. The ship was massive and expensive. Jack could tell it belonged to someone with wealth and power. The corridors were decorated with art and the floors were made of polished stone imported from somewhere. There were guards everywhere, but they ignored the maintenance worker. Jack moved with purpose through the ship, following the route he had memorized. He took maintenance shafts and service corridors to avoid the main pathways. He disabled security cameras as he went using a device Lisa had provided. It would only give him a few minutes before the ship's systems noticed, but that was all he needed. Jack found the holding cells deep in the ship's lower sections. There were guards posted, but he waited until they rotated shifts. In that brief window, he used his stolen codes to access the cell block. He moved quickly past several cells holding other prisoners until he found the one he was looking for. Maya sat on the floor of her cell with her back against the wall. Her hands were still bound in energy chains and her wrists were bloody where she had been working at them. When Jack appeared at the force field, she looked up with suspicion in her eyes. Jack held up his hands to show he was not a threat. He spoke quietly through the field. He told her he was from New Arizona. He said he had come to get her out. Maya studied him for a long moment. Then she noticed the old ranger badge he had pinned inside his coat. Recognition flashed across her face. She asked if he was really going to try to rescue her, or if this was some kind of trick. Jack pulled out a plasma cutter and deactivated the force field. He stepped into the cell and knelt beside her. He said it was no trick. He said that people from New Arizona took care of their own. He reached for her chains with the cutter, but before he could touch them, an alarm began to sound throughout the ship. Jack cursed under his breath. They were out of time. The alarm shrieked through the corridors like a wounded animal. Jack pulled Maya to her feet and they ran from the cell even though her chain still glowed blue around her wrists. They made it 3 corridors before the guards found them. There were 6 Krell soldiers in armor carrying energy rifles. Jack pushed Maya behind him and drew his plasma revolver. The firefight was brief and brutal. Jack took down 2 guards before the others forced him and Maya to retreat back toward the holding cells. They ran through doorways and down passages trying to find another route. But the ship's security systems had locked down the entire section. Every door they tried was sealed. Every corridor led to more guards. They ended up trapped in a dead-end corridor with nowhere left to run. Jack had his weapon ready, but he was down to his last power cell. Maya stood beside him with her chained hands raised like she would fight with them if she had to. The guards surrounded them and more were coming. Jack knew they were finished. Then Zarth himself arrived. The Krell noble wore flowing robes and jewelry that marked his status. He was flanked by a dozen more guards with weapons pointed at Jack and Maya. Zarth walked forward slowly with his head tilted like he was examining interesting insects. When he spoke, it was in heavily accented English. Zarth said he was impressed that a human had managed to infiltrate his ship. He said it showed courage even if it was foolish courage. He looked at Maya and said it was a shame his new acquisition had attracted such troublesome attention. He asked Jack why he would throw his life away for a slave. Jack kept his weapon trained on Zarth. He said Maya was not a slave. He said she was a person and a citizen of New Arizona Colony. He said the Krell had no right to take her or any of the others. Zarth laughed at that. The sound was like rocks grinding together. He said humans had no power in this region of space. He said they were newcomers who did not understand how things worked. He said slavery had existed in the galaxy for thousands of years and would continue long after humans were extinct. Maya spoke then for the first time since Jack found her. Her voice was rough from lack of water, but it was steady. She said that her people had dealt with slavers before. She said the Apache had been hunted and captured and sold for centuries on Earth. She said they had survived and their captors had not. She looked directly at Zarth and said he would learn the same lesson. Zarth moved closer to Maya. He reached out with one scaled hand as if to touch her face. Maya jerked away from him. Zarth made an amused sound. He said she would learn obedience soon enough. He said he had broken stronger wills than hers. He said that by the time he was finished with her, she would beg to serve him. Maya's response was immediate. She spat in his face. The saliva struck Zarth's scaled cheek and he recoiled in shock and disgust. The guards moved forward with their weapons raised, but Zarth held up a hand to stop them. His yellow eyes blazed with anger. He wiped his face with his robe and then backhanded Maya across the face. The blow sent her stumbling into the wall. Jack raised his weapon, but a guard struck him from behind. He went down to his knees with his head ringing. More guards grabbed him and pulled his weapon away. They forced his arms behind his back and held him while Zarth approached. The Krell noble stood over Jack and said he admired human loyalty, but it was misplaced. He offered Jack a deal. Leave now and live. Forget about the woman and go back to whatever colony he came from. Zarth said he would even pay Jack for the trouble. 10,000 credits just to walk away. Jack looked up at Zarth and said something in Spanish that his grandmother had taught him. It was not polite. Zarth did not understand the words, but he understood the tone. His expression darkened. He said that Jack had chosen death then. He ordered the guards to take Jack to the airlock and space him. Maya screamed from where she stood against the wall. She pulled against her chains hard enough that blood ran freely from her wrists. She shouted that she would kill Zarth herself if he hurt Jack. She said she would find a way no matter what it took. The guards holding her tightened their grip. Zarth turned back to Maya with interest. He said she seemed to care about this human stranger who came for her. He said that was a weakness he could use. He told the guards to bring Jack to the observation deck instead. He said Maya would watch what happened to those who defied him. They were taken through the ship to a large room with transparent walls showing the stars beyond. Jack was forced to his knees in the center of the room. Maya was held near the wall, still in chains. Zarth stood between them, looking very pleased with himself. He explained that Jack would not be spaced after all. Instead, he would be sold as a slave just like Maya. Zarth said he knew buyers who would pay well for a human male with spirit. He said Jack would spend the rest of his life working in mines or factories. He said it was a fate worse than death, and it would teach Maya what happened to her heroes. Maya strained against the guards holding her. She said words in Apache that Jack did not understand, but the tone was clear. It was a war cry. It was a promise of vengeance. Zarth laughed and said her spirit would be entertaining to break. Jack met Maya's eyes across the room. He tried to tell her without words that it would be okay. He tried to tell her not to give up. But he knew they were both finished. He had failed. He thought about all the other people from New Arizona who were still enslaved somewhere. He thought about how no one would come for them now. Zarth called for his personal guards to take Jack to the holding cells. As they grabbed Jack's arms to lift him, the ship suddenly shook. The lights flickered and alarms began to sound again, but these were different alarms. These were emergency warnings. Zarth barked orders in his own language, demanding to know what was happening. A voice came over the ship's communication system speaking in Krell. Jack did not understand the words, but he saw. Zarth's expression changed from anger to shock. The Krell noble rushed to a control panel on the wall and activated a display. Jack could see what looked like sensor readings showing multiple ships approaching their position. Zarth cursed in his language. He shouted more orders and guards ran from the room. The ones holding Jack and Maya remained, but they looked nervous now. Jack did not know what was happening, but he knew it was bad for Zarth. That meant it might be good for him and Maya. The ship shook again, harder this time. The lights went out completely for a moment, before emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Maya used the confusion to move. She swung her chained hands at the guard nearest her. The heavy energy cuff struck the Krell in the face and he went down. The other guard turned toward her and Jack moved too. He threw himself backward into the guard behind him. They both fell to the floor. Jack rolled and came up with the guard's rifle in his hands. He did not know how to use Krell weapons, but he figured the trigger was universal. He aimed at the remaining guards and fired. The weapon kicked in his hands and energy bolts lit up the room. In the chaos, Jack ran to Maya. She held out her hands and he used the captured rifle to blast her chains. The energy cuffs shattered and fell away. Maya rubbed her bloody wrists and then grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard. She and Jack stood back to back as more guards poured into the room. Zarth had fled somewhere during the fighting. Jack said they needed to move. Maya agreed. They ran from the observation deck into corridors filled with smoke and emergency lights. The ship was under attack from someone and Jack did not know who. But right now the enemy of his enemy was his friend. He and Maya just needed to survive long enough to find out what was happening. The ship's corridors were chaos. Krell crew members ran in every direction, trying to respond to the attack. Emergency lights painted everything red, and alarms screamed from every speaker. Jack and Maya moved through the confusion like ghosts. They kept to the walls and avoided the main passages where guards were gathering. Jack had no idea who was attacking the ship, but he was grateful for the distraction. Without it, he and Maya would already be dead or back in chains. He led them toward where he remembered the docking bay being located. If they could reach it, they might find a way off this ship. It was a slim chance, but it was better than nothing. Maya moved beside him with the confidence of someone trained in combat. She cleared corners properly and kept her captured weapon ready. Jack remembered that she had been a security officer for the colony. That training was showing now. She was hurt and exhausted, but she kept moving without complaint. They reached an intersection where 3 corridors met. Jack paused to check his direction. He had memorized the ship's layout, but everything looked different in the emergency lighting. Maya tapped his shoulder and pointed down the left corridor. She had seen a sign in the Krell language that Jack had missed. He nodded and they went that way. The corridor opened into a cargo bay. It was a massive space filled with containers and equipment. On the far side, Jack could see doors that led toward the docking area. They started across the open floor, staying low behind the cargo containers. They were halfway across when a group of Krell guards entered from another door. The guards saw them immediately and opened fire. Energy bolts burned through the air, leaving trails of light. Jack and Maya dove behind a large container as the bolts struck all around them. Jack returned fire while Maya looked for another way out. She spotted a maintenance ladder leading up to a catwalk that crossed the ceiling. She grabbed Jack's arm and pointed. They ran for the ladder while firing behind them to keep the guards back. Jack went up first and then reached down to help Maya. Bullets struck the ladder as they climbed, making it ring like a bell. They reached the catwalk and ran across it toward the far side of the cargo bay. Below them, more guards were entering and spreading out to search. The catwalk led to a door high in the wall. Jack forced it open and they squeezed through into a narrow maintenance shaft. The shaft was barely wide enough for a human, and it stretched into darkness. Jack activated a light on the rifle he had taken. The beam showed pipes and cables running along the walls. They started crawling forward. Maya asked where they were going. Jack said he was hoping this shaft would take them around the guards and get them closer to the docking bay. Maya said that was a terrible plan. Jack agreed, but said he was open to suggestions. Maya was quiet for a moment, then said his terrible plan was better than nothing. They kept crawling. The shaft branched several times. Jack picked directions at random. He had lost his sense of direction in the cramped space. All he could do was keep moving forward and hope they came out somewhere useful. Behind them, he could hear the sounds of pursuit. The Krell were too large to fit in the shaft, but they were trying to cut through from the outside. The shaft suddenly ended at a grate. Through the grate, Jack could see another corridor. He kicked the grate until it broke free and they dropped down. The corridor was empty, but Jack could hear voices nearby. He and Maya moved quickly in the opposite direction from the voices. They found themselves in what looked like crew quarters. There were small rooms branching off the main corridor, each one containing a bunk and personal items. Jack realized they must be near the ship's living areas. That meant they had gone the wrong direction from the docking bay. He cursed under his breath. Maya pointed to one of the rooms. She said they should hide for a minute and figure out their next move. Jack agreed. They slipped into one of the rooms and closed the door. The room belonged to a Krell crew member. There were clothes and personal items scattered around. Maya grabbed a container of water from a shelf and drank deeply. She offered it to Jack and he drank as well. Jack checked the power cell on his rifle. It was down to 20%. Maya's weapon was at 30. They would not last long in another firefight. Jack said they needed to find another way off the ship. Maybe they could steal an escape pod or a shuttle. Maya said that was assuming the attacking ships did not just blow them up as soon as they launched. Jack asked if she had a better idea. Maya thought for a moment. She said the ship must have a communication system. If they could reach it, they could try to contact the attacking ships. They could identify themselves as human prisoners and ask for help. Jack liked that idea better than his. He asked if she knew where the communications would be. Maya said probably near the bridge. They left the crew quarters and started looking for a way up. The ship's layout had multiple decks and the bridge would be on top. They found a stairwell, but it was being used by Krell moving between levels. Jack and Maya waited for a gap in the traffic, then slipped into the stairwell. They climbed quickly, hoping no one would notice them. On the third level up, they encountered a problem. A security checkpoint blocked the stairs. There were 4 guards checking everyone who passed. Jack and Maya could not fight through 4 guards without raising the alarm. They backed down to the previous level to find another route. Maya spotted a supply lift that ran between the decks. It was designed for moving cargo, but it was large enough for people. They pried open the doors and climbed onto the lift platform. Jack found the controls and sent them upward. The lift was slow and loud. Jack worried someone would hear them, but the sounds of the ship under attack covered their noise. The lift passed the checkpoint level and continued upward. Jack stopped it at the deck below the bridge. They climbed off and found themselves in officer territory. The corridors were nicer here with better lighting and decorations. They moved carefully, watching for patrols. They reached a junction where a map display showed the ship's layout. Jack studied it quickly. The bridge was directly above them, but there were multiple security doors in the way. The communication center, however, was off to the side with fewer barriers. He showed Maya and she nodded. They made their way toward the communication center. The corridors were mostly empty as crew focused on the battle. They passed windows showing the space outside. Jack could see other ships out there firing at Zarth's vessel. The attacking ships were smaller and faster. They looked like pirates or raiders. Jack wondered if they were after the same cargo he was trying to free. The communication center had 2 guards at the door. Jack and Maya had no choice but to fight. They opened fire simultaneously, taking both guards down before they could react. Jack grabbed one of their access cards and opened the door. Inside the communication center were banks of equipment and several stations. 3 Krell technicians were working the stations. They turned in surprise when Jack and Maya entered. Jack told them to get away from the controls. The technicians hesitated. Maya fired a shot into the ceiling and repeated the command in the basic Krell she had picked up. The technicians scrambled away from their stations with their hands raised. Jack forced them into a corner and told them to stay there. Maya moved to one of the communication stations. She studied the controls, trying to make sense of the Krell interface. Jack kept his weapon on the technicians while watching the door. Maya found what looked like the ship-to-ship communication system. She activated it and spoke in English, hoping someone out there was listening. She identified herself as Maya Redfeather, a human being held prisoner on the Krell ship. She said there were other human prisoners aboard. She asked whoever was attacking to please respond. There was silence. Maya repeated the message. Still nothing. Jack felt hope starting to drain away. Then a voice came through the speakers. It spoke in English with a rough accent. The voice said they had received Maya's transmission. They said they were an independent colonial militia hunting Krell slavers. They said they knew there were human prisoners aboard and they were here to help. The voice asked how many prisoners and where they were located. Maya almost cried with relief. She told them she knew of at least 17 humans from New Arizona colony. She said most were probably in holding cells on the lower decks. The voice said they were preparing to board the ship. They told Maya and Jack to stay safe and stay hidden. Help was coming. Jack asked Maya if she trusted them. Maya said she did not have a choice. They could not escape on their own. Jack agreed. They secured the technicians in a storage closet. and then barricaded the door to the communication center. All they could do now was wait and hope the militia was as good as their word. The wait felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Jack and Maya heard the sounds of fighting getting closer. Energy weapons fired in the corridors outside. There were shouts in Krell and other languages. The militia was fighting their way through the ship deck by deck. The communication equipment crackled to life again. The same rough voice from before asked if Maya was still there. She confirmed that she and Jack were barricaded in the communication center. The voice said a squad was coming to their location. He told them to be ready to identify themselves as friendly. Heavy footsteps approached the door. Someone knocked 3 times, then twice, then once. The voice came through the door asking if anyone was inside. Jack called back in English. He said there were 2 humans and they were armed. The voice told them to open the door slowly with weapons down. Jack moved the barricade and opened the door carefully. On the other side was a squad of 6 humans in mismatched armor carrying various weapons. They looked like frontiersmen and soldiers rather than professional military. The squad leader was a tall man with a scarred face and gray hair. He looked at Jack and Maya with approval. He introduced himself as Danny Carson from the colony of New Providence. He said his militia had been tracking this particular Krell slaver for months. When they learned he had taken humans from New Arizona, they decided to hit him hard. Danny asked if Jack and Maya knew where the other prisoners were being held. Jack said he had been in the holding cells on the lower decks before everything went crazy. There were multiple prisoners down there, not just humans. Maya added that she had seen the layout when she was first brought aboard. She said she could lead them there if they gave her a real weapon and some armor. Danny looked her over, noting her bloody wrists and exhausted state. He asked if she was sure she was up for it. Maya's eyes flashed with anger. She said she had been held prisoner long enough. She said she would walk through fire to free the others. Danny grinned and told one of his squad members to gear her up. They gave Maya body armor that was too big, but she made it work. They gave her a rifle with full power cells and a sidearm. Jack got armor too and fresh ammunition. With proper equipment, he felt almost human again. Danny said his people had control of most of the upper decks. The Krell crew was either dead or had retreated to secure areas. But the lower decks were still contested. The squad moved out with Jack and Maya leading the way. They took the service lifts down, avoiding areas where Krell resistance was strongest. On the lower decks, they encountered scattered fighting. Danny's militia had sent multiple squads through the ship, and they were linking up as they went. They reached the holding cell area to find it heavily guarded. A dozen Krell soldiers had fortified the entrance. They had set up barriers and heavy weapons. Danny's squad took cover and assessed the situation. A direct assault would cost lives. Jack asked if they had any explosives. Danny said they had breaching charges, but using them near the cells might hurt the prisoners. Maya had an idea. She pointed to an air vent near the ceiling. She said the vents connected to the cell area. Someone small could crawl through and open the doors from inside while the squad assaulted from the front. Danny said it was risky. Maya said so was everything else they had done today. Jack volunteered to go with her, but Maya said he was too big. She would go alone. Jack did not like it, but he knew she was right. Danny gave her a small explosive and a communication earpiece. He said to wait for his signal before opening the doors. Maya climbed into the vent and disappeared. Jack watched her go, feeling useless. Danny positioned his squad for the assault. They had 3 minutes before Maya would be in position. Jack checked his weapon and prepared himself. He had come to this ship to save one person. Now he was part of something bigger. Through his earpiece, Jack heard Maya's voice. She said she was at the cell control room. There were 2 guards inside. She was going to take them quietly. There were sounds of movement, then silence. Maya's voice came back. She said the guards were down and she had control of the doors. Danny told her to wait. Danny counted down from 3. On 0, his squad opened fire on the Krell position. The guards returned fire and the corridor exploded with energy bolts. Under cover of the firefight, Maya opened the cell doors remotely. Prisoners began streaming out of the cells into the chaos. Some of the prisoners were human. Others were different species Jack did not recognize. They were all confused and scared. The Krell guards realized what was happening and tried to regroup, but it was too late. The freed prisoners attacked them from behind while Danny's squad pressed from the front. The guards were overwhelmed. Jack pushed through the fighting into the cell area looking for Maya. He found her helping prisoners out of their cells. She was speaking to each one in English or broken trade language, telling them to follow the human soldiers. Jack reached her side and together they cleared the remaining cells. One cell held the people Jack recognized from New Arizona. Old Henry the shopkeeper was there. Claire the teacher. Pete from the water recyclers. They looked thin and beaten but alive. When they saw Jack and Maya, their faces lit up with hope. Jack told them they were going home. The group moved back toward the main corridor. Danny's squad was forming up the freed prisoners into a column. There were almost 40 prisoners total. Danny said they needed to move fast. The Krell would regroup soon and try to stop them from leaving. He ordered his squad to protect the prisoners at all costs. They started back through the ship toward the docking bay. It was slow going with so many people. Some of the prisoners were injured and had to be helped along. They encountered Krell defenders twice, and both times Danny's militia drove them back. Jack and Maya fought alongside the squad, protecting the rear of the column. They reached the docking bay to find it partially in ruins. The battle had torn through here earlier. Several small craft were damaged, but there were still functional shuttles. Danny's people started loading prisoners into the shuttles. Jack helped Maya guide the New Arizona colonists to one of the larger craft. Zarth appeared with a squad of his personal guards. The Krell noble looked furious. His robes were torn and his scales were scorched from fighting. He pointed at Maya and shouted in English that she was his property. He demanded the humans return her and the other slaves immediately. Maya stepped forward before anyone could stop her. She faced Zarth across the docking bay floor. She said she had something to tell him. Zarth told her to speak. Maya said she would rather die than be his. She said no human would ever bow to him or his kind. She said this attack was just the beginning. Humans would hunt every slaver in the galaxy until none remained. Zarth raised his weapon, but Danny's squad was faster. They fired as one, and Zarth went down along with his guards. It was over in seconds. Jack expected to feel satisfaction, but instead he just felt tired. How many more Zarth were out there? How many more humans were enslaved? This rescue was just a drop in an ocean. Danny called for everyone to board the shuttles. The ship was failing and they needed to leave before it broke apart. The last of the prisoners were loaded. Jack climbed into a shuttle with Maya and the New Arizona colonists. Through the windows he could see Danny's militia ships pulling away. The shuttles launched one by one. As they flew away from the dying Krell vessel, Jack looked at the people around him. They were free. They were going home. Maya sat near the back of the shuttle with her eyes closed. Jack could see tears on her face. He did not disturb her. She had earned the right to cry. Danny's voice came over the communication system. He said they were setting course for New Providence, where the freed prisoners could receive medical care. From there, they would arrange transport back to their home colonies. He said today was a victory for all humans. He said it proved they could fight back against slavers and win. Jack leaned back in his seat and closed his eyes. For the first time in months, he felt something like peace. It would not last. There was too much work still to do. But for now, for this moment, it was enough. The colony of New Providence hung in orbit around a green and blue world. It was not a planet, but a massive station built from connected modules and habitats. Hundreds of thousands of people called it home. As the shuttles approached, Jack could see why Danny's militia operated from here. The station was independent and well defended. It was a safe harbor in a dangerous region of space. The shuttles docked in a bay that had been cleared for their arrival. Medical teams waited with equipment and supplies. As the doors opened and the freed prisoners emerged, the medical staff moved forward to help. Maya walked out on her own, refusing assistance even though she swayed on her feet. Jack stayed close to her in case she fell. The New Arizona colonists were taken to a medical center for examination. Jack went with them, making sure no one was left behind. The doctor said most of the colonists had injuries and malnutrition, but nothing permanent. With rest and treatment, they would recover. Old Henry grabbed Jack's hand and thanked him. Claire hugged him. Pete just nodded with tears in his eyes. Maya was in worse shape than she let on. The doctors found broken ribs and infected cuts, along with the obvious damage to her wrists. They wanted to keep her for observation, but Maya refused. She said she had been locked up long enough. She would accept treatment, but she would not stay in the medical center. The doctors argued, but Maya was immovable. Finally, they agreed to let her go if someone stayed with her. Jack volunteered without thinking. Maya looked at him with surprise. She asked why he would do that. Jack said he had come to this region to find the people from New Arizona. He was not done until everyone was safe. Maya seemed to accept that answer. The doctors treated her wounds and gave her medication. Then Jack helped her to temporary quarters the station had provided. The quarters were small but clean. There were 2 bunks and a bathroom and a window showing the planet below. Maya sat on one of the bunks and stared at the window without speaking. Jack left her alone and went to find food. When he returned with meals from the station cafeteria, Maya was still staring out the window. Jack set the food down and asked if she was okay. Maya did not answer right away. Finally, she said she kept expecting to wake up back in the cell. She said freedom did not feel real yet. Jack said he understood. He sat down and started eating. After a moment, Maya joined him. They ate in silence. Over the next few days, the freed prisoners recovered. The station provided them with clothes and supplies. Danny's militia helped arrange transportation back to their home colonies. The new Arizona colonists would leave in a week on a transport heading to their sector. Jack planned to go with them. He wanted to see the colony rebuilt. Maya spent most of her time alone. She would sit by the window or walk the station corridors. Jack checked on her regularly but did not push her to talk. Trauma needed time to heal, and he knew that. On the 4th day, she finally spoke to him about what had happened. She said she remembered every moment of her captivity. The auction, the chains, Zarth's threats. She said what bothered her most was not the physical pain. It was the helplessness. Being property, having no control over her own fate. She said her grandmother had told her stories about slavery on Earth. She never thought she would experience it herself. Jack listened without interrupting. When Maya finished, he told her about his own experience with the Krell years ago. He had been captured during a raid on another colony. He was held for 3 days before rangers rescued him. Those 3 days haunted him for years. He said the nightmares eventually faded, but they never fully went away. He said that was okay. Scars were proof you survived. Maya asked Jack why he became a bounty hunter after being a ranger. Jack said the corporations took over law enforcement on the frontier. They only cared about protecting their assets, not people. He could not work for them, so he went independent. He hunted criminals for money, but he also looked for missing people. He said it was not much, but it was something. Maya said she wanted to do something too. She could not go back to being a security officer on a small colony. She had seen too much. She needed to fight the slavers. She asked Jack if he would teach her. She said she knew combat basics, but she needed to be better. She needed to be deadly. Jack considered her request carefully. He asked if she was sure. Hunting slavers was dangerous work. Most people who tried it ended up dead or captured. Maya said she was sure. She said she had looked into Zarth's eyes when he thought he owned her. She would never forget that feeling. If she could stop even one other person from experiencing it, then the danger was worth it. Jack agreed to train her. They started the next day. The station had training facilities that Danny's militia used. Jack taught Maya how to shoot better, how to move in combat, how to read situations and anticipate danger. Maya learned quickly. She had natural talent and fierce determination. Danny Carson visited them during training. He watched Maya put 3 shots through the center of a target from 50 meters. He asked Jack where he found her. Jack said she found herself. Danny said his militia could use people like her. He offered Maya a position if she wanted it. Maya said she would think about it. That evening, Jack and Maya sat in their quarters talking. Maya said she appreciated Danny's offer, but she wanted to go back to New Arizona first. She needed to see the colony. She needed to make sure the people there were okay. Then she would decide what to do next. Jack said that was smart. He said rushing into things led to mistakes. Maya asked Jack what he would do. He said he would help rebuild the colony for a while. Then he would go back to hunting slavers. There were still dozens of people from New Arizona unaccounted for. He would not stop until he found them all or confirmed they were dead. Maya said she wanted to help him. Jack said he was counting on it. The week passed quickly. The transport arrived to take the New Arizona colonists home. Jack and Maya packed their few belongings. The other colonists thanked them again and again. Old Henry gave Jack a flask he had somehow kept through his captivity. He said it was good whiskey from Earth. Jack accepted it with gratitude. Danny came to see them off. He told Maya his offer stood whenever she was ready. He gave Jack a communication code and said to call if he needed backup. The militia would answer. Jack shook his hand. These were good people fighting a good fight. The galaxy needed more of them. The transport was a commercial freighter with passenger compartments. It was not fancy, but it was clean and safe. The journey to New Arizona would take 2 weeks. Jack found a bunk in the crew area. Maya took one nearby. As the transport jumped to faster than light speed, Jack felt himself relax for the first time since the rescue. Maya came to find him a few hours into the journey. She sat down and said she had been thinking. She said that when she was chained up waiting to be sold, she had prayed to her grandmother's spirit. She had asked for a chance to fight back. Then Jack appeared. She said she did not believe in coincidence. She said maybe her grandmother had sent him. Jack said he did not know about spirits, but he believed people were meant to help each other. He said humans were strongest when they stood together. That was how they would survive in this galaxy full of predators, by watching each other's backs and never leaving anyone behind. Maya agreed. She said that was what it meant to be human, not superior technology or physical strength, but loyalty and courage and the refusal to break. She said the Krell thought humans were weak because they were new to space, but the Krell had never faced Apache warriors. They had never faced anyone who would rather die than surrender. Jack smiled at that. He said the galaxy was going to learn about humanity the hard way, through people like Maya, through colonists who refused to quit, through militias like Danny's. The slavers had made a mistake when they targeted humans. They had awakened something they could not put back to sleep. The transport traveled through the void between stars carrying its cargo of freed prisoners. In the crew compartments, Jack and Maya rested and healed. They were going home. But home was different now. They were different. They had seen the darkness between the stars and they had survived it. That changed a person. It made them harder. It made them ready for the fight ahead. New Arizona waited for them somewhere in the distance. The colony would need rebuilding. There would be grief for those still missing. There would be fear of another raid. But there would also be hope. Because some of their people had come home. Because someone had cared enough to search for them. Because humans did not abandon their own. Maya fell asleep in her bunk with her hand resting on the weapon she now carried always. Jack stayed awake watching the stars through a porthole. He thought about all the people still enslaved out there. He thought about the work yet to do. But for now there was peace. For now there was rest. Tomorrow the fight would continue. Tonight they could breathe. The transport dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the New Arizona system. Through the portholes, Jack could see the familiar yellow sun that warmed the colony world. It had been 4 months since he left. 4 months of searching and fighting and hoping. Now he was home. The colony world grew larger as the transport approached. It was a desert planet with 2 small oceans and scattered mountain ranges. Most of the settlements were built near underground water sources. New Arizona colony sat in a valley between red mesas. From orbit, Jack could see the damage the Krell raid had caused. Several buildings were destroyed. Fields were burned. But there were also signs of rebuilding. New structures rising. People working. The transport landed at the colony spaceport. The landing pad was repaired since the raid, but there were still scorch marks on the concrete. Jack and Maya disembarked with the other returning colonists. A crowd waited at the edge of the landing area. When they saw the freed prisoners, the crowd erupted in cheers and tears. Families reunited. People hugged and cried. Old Henry was swept up by his children and grandchildren. Claire was surrounded by her former students. Pete found his brother, and they held each other without speaking. Jack stood back and watched. This was what he had fought for. These moments of joy. Maya walked into the crowd alone. She had no family on New Arizona. Her parents were on another colony, and she had not seen them in years. But colonists came to her anyway. They thanked her for surviving. They told her she was brave. Maya accepted their words with grace, but Jack could see the pain in her eyes. She felt guilty for being free when others were still captive. The colony administrator approached Jack. Her name was Linda Torres, and she ran the civilian government. She shook his hand firmly and thanked him for bringing people home. She said the colony had been in mourning since the raid. The return of survivors gave everyone hope. She asked if Jack would speak at a gathering that evening. Jack did not want to speak in front of people, but he agreed. Linda said the gathering would be at the community center. Everyone would be there. She wanted the returned colonists to tell their stories so people understood what had happened. Jack said he would be there. The colonists dispersed to their homes and families. Jack went to his own dwelling on the edge of the settlement. It was a small prefabricated structure half buried in the sand for temperature control. Inside, everything was as he left it. Dust covered the furniture and the air was stale. He opened the vents to let in fresh air and started cleaning. Maya appeared at his door an hour later. She said she had nowhere to go. The housing she used before the raid had been destroyed. Jack told her she could stay with him until new housing was arranged. He had a spare room that was barely used. Maya accepted gratefully. They spent the afternoon making the dwelling livable. Jack showed Maya how the water recycler worked and where supplies were kept. She helped him repair a broken solar panel on the roof. Working together felt natural after everything they had been through. By evening, the dwelling was clean and functioning. They walked to the community center as the sun set. The desert sky turned orange and purple. Jack had missed these sunsets during his time away. The community center was packed with people. Every colonist who could walk was there. They sat on benches and stood along the walls. Children sat on the floor in front. Linda Torres stood at a podium and called for quiet. She spoke about the raid and the losses the colony suffered. She said 103 people were taken. 17 had returned. The others were still missing but not forgotten. She said the colony would never stop looking for them. Then she introduced the returned colonists. One by one, they came forward and told their stories. Old Henry spoke about the auction and the fear of being sold. Claire described the holding cells and the cruelty of the guards. Pete talked about losing hope and then finding it again when the rescue came. Each story was different, but they all shared the same themes: captivity, fear, survival, hope. When it was Jack's turn, he walked to the podium reluctantly. He looked out at the sea of faces. He saw people he knew and people he did not. He saw grief and anger and determination. He spoke simply about tracking the slavers, about finding the auction, about meeting Maya and deciding to act. He talked about the militia from New Providence and the battle on Zarth's ship. He ended by saying that humans would never accept slavery. They would fight it wherever they found it. The crowd applauded, but Jack felt uncomfortable with the attention. He returned to his seat quickly. Maya was called next. She walked to the podium with her head high. She spoke in a clear, strong voice about her capture, about refusing to break, about her grandmother's teachings giving her strength. She told them about the moment when Jack appeared at her cell, about fighting their way through the ship, about freeing the other prisoners. Then Maya said something that made the crowd go silent. She said the Krell slavers thought humans were weak. They thought humans were easy prey. She said Zarth had told her that humans had no power in this region of space, that they would be hunted and sold and nobody would care. Maya paused and looked around the room. She said Zarth was wrong. She said humans had power in their unity, in their refusal to abandon each other, in their willingness to fight impossible odds. She said that was a power no slaver could break. The crowd rose to their feet. The applause was deafening. Maya stood at the podium with tears streaming down her face. She had said what everyone needed to hear, that they were not helpless, that they could fight back, that their people mattered. After the gathering, people approached Jack and Maya with questions. How could they help? What could they do? Where were the other missing colonists? Jack answered as best he could. He said there were slaver networks throughout this sector. Finding specific prisoners was difficult, but there were people like Danny's militia working on it. The more humans who joined the fight, the better their chances. Several younger colonists said they wanted to join the militia. Jack told them to contact Danny through the codes he would provide. He warned them it was dangerous work. People died fighting slavers, but he did not try to discourage them. The galaxy needed fighters. Late that night, Jack and Maya returned to his dwelling. They sat outside on the sand watching the stars. The desert was quiet except for the wind. Maya said she felt strange being back. Everything looked the same but felt different. Jack said that was normal. They had changed. They could not go back to who they were before. Maya asked Jack if he regretted going after her, if he regretted getting involved. Jack thought about the question. He said he regretted not being here during the raid. If he had been, maybe he could have stopped some of it. But he did not regret the rescue. He said meeting Maya and working with Danny's militia had given him purpose. He had been drifting before. Now he knew what he was fighting for. Maya said she wanted to keep fighting. She said one rescue was not enough. There were still dozens of people from New Arizona out there, plus countless others from different colonies. She could not rest while they suffered. Jack said he felt the same way. He asked if she wanted to partner with him, travel together hunting slavers and freeing prisoners. Maya agreed immediately. They made plans sitting in the desert darkness. They would stay at New Arizona for a month helping rebuild. Then they would leave. Jack had contacts in the criminal underworld who sold information about slaver operations. Maya could use her new combat skills. Together they would be more effective than apart. They would find the missing colonists. They would hit the slavers hard enough that others would think twice about targeting humans. Over the next weeks, the colony slowly returned to normal life. Fields were replanted. Buildings were rebuilt. Security was improved with new sensors and weapons. The returned colonists integrated back into the community. Some struggled with nightmares and fear. Others threw themselves into work trying to forget. Maya helped establish support groups for survivors. She understood what they were going through. Jack spent his time training colonists in combat and security. He taught them how to respond to raids, how to fight back, how to survive. The colony administrator approved the training. No one wanted to be caught helpless again. Young and old alike learned to use weapons and tactics. New Arizona would not be an easy target anymore. Maya continued her own training. She practiced shooting until she could hit targets at incredible distances. She learned hand-to-hand combat from an old Marine who had retired to the colony. She studied Krell tactics and weaknesses. She became harder and more focused. The trauma of her captivity was transforming into purpose. The month passed quickly. On the last day before their departure, the colony held a ceremony. Linda Torres presented Jack and Maya with medallions bearing the New Arizona symbol. She said they were honorary defenders of the colony. She said they would always have a home here. The colonists cheered and chanted their names. Jack felt emotion welling up in his throat. He had lived in many places but never belonged anywhere. New Arizona had become home without him realizing it. He promised the colonists he would continue fighting for their missing people. He would not stop until everyone was accounted for. Maya made a promise too. She said she would carry the spirit of her Apache ancestors with her. She said they had never surrendered and neither would she. 6 months after leaving New Arizona, Jack and Maya had become legends in the frontier colonies. Stories spread about the cowboy and the Apache woman who hunted slavers. Some stories were true. Others were exaggerated. All of them carried the same message. Humans would not tolerate slavery, and those who practiced it would pay the price. Their shuttle arrived at a mining station called Black Rock. It was a rough place where criminals and workers mixed freely. Jack had received information that a Krell slaver named Kesh operated from here. Kesh supposedly held human prisoners in a warehouse on the station's industrial level. Jack and Maya planned to verify the information and then act. They docked the shuttle and entered the station wearing civilian clothes. Jack kept his hat pulled low. Maya wore a jacket that hid her weapons. They moved through the crowded corridors like tourists. No one gave them a second look. That was how Jack preferred it. Surprise was their greatest advantage. The industrial level was less crowded. Warehouses and factories lined the corridors. The air smelled like chemicals and hot metal. Jack and Maya found the warehouse their contact had identified. It was larger than the others with heavy security doors and guards posted outside. The guards were Krell wearing armor and carrying weapons. Jack and Maya watched from a maintenance alcove across the corridor. Jack used a scanner to check for life signs inside the warehouse. The scanner showed 37 beings. Some were moving around. Others were stationary. That matched a slaver operation, guards and prisoners. Jack told Maya they would return after dark when there were fewer people around. They spent the rest of the day gathering supplies. Maya purchased explosives from a black market dealer. Jack acquired override codes for the warehouse security from a hacker. They returned to their shuttle and prepared their equipment. By the time they were ready, the station's artificial night cycle had begun. They approached the warehouse in the darkness. The guards had changed shifts. There were only 4 now instead of 8. Jack and Maya split up. Jack circled around to a side entrance. Maya approached from above using maintenance shafts. They synchronized their watches and counted down. At 0, Maya dropped through a ceiling vent into the warehouse. She landed in a storage area away from the guards. Jack used the override codes to open the side entrance. He slipped inside and found cover behind shipping containers. Through hand signals, they confirmed they were both in position. Then Maya triggered the explosives she had placed outside the main entrance. The explosion was loud and bright. The guards rushed toward the main doors thinking they were under attack. Jack and Maya moved deeper into the warehouse while the guards were distracted. They found the prisoner holding area in the back section. 20 humans were chained in cages. Most were unconscious or too weak to move. Among them, Jack recognized two faces from New Arizona. A young man named Carlos and a woman named Rita. They had been missing since the raid. Maya began cutting the locks on the cages while Jack provided security. The freed prisoners were confused and scared. Jack spoke calmly, telling them rescue was here. He told them to stay quiet and follow instructions. Maya helped them out of the cages and gave weapons to those strong enough to hold them. Alarms started blaring. The Krell guards had figured out the explosion was a diversion. They were coming back. Jack told Maya to get the prisoners moving toward the side exit. He would hold the guards off. Maya argued, but Jack insisted. She gathered the prisoners and started leading them out. The guards arrived in force. There were a dozen of them now. Jack took cover behind industrial equipment and opened fire. His plasma revolver burned through the air, taking down guards. But there were too many. They spread out and started flanking his position. Jack retreated slowly, keeping them occupied while Maya evacuated the prisoners. A guard got close enough to throw a grenade. Jack dove away as the explosion tore through his cover. Shrapnel cut his shoulder and arm. He rolled to his feet and kept firing even as blood ran down his sleeve. He could not let them pass. The prisoners needed more time. Maya's voice came through his earpiece. She said the prisoners were at the shuttle. She was coming back for him. Jack told her negative. He said to get those people off the station. He would find his own way out. Maya cursed at him in Apache and said she was not leaving him. Jack smiled despite the situation. He should have known better than to argue with her. Maya appeared behind the guards. She must have circled through the maintenance shafts. She opened fire on them from their blind side. The guards scattered, trying to respond to threats from two directions. In the confusion, Jack advanced. He and Maya fought their way toward each other. When they met, they moved together toward the exit. More guards arrived, but these were station security, not Krell slavers. They took one look at the battle and decided they were not paid enough to get involved. They sealed the area and called for reinforcements. Jack and Maya used the delay to escape through the maintenance tunnels. They made it back to their shuttle as station security was still organizing a response. The shuttle launched with Maya at the controls. Jack slumped in the co-pilot seat, trying to stop his bleeding. Maya flew them out of the station at maximum speed. Once they were clear, she engaged the faster-than-light drive. They jumped to a safe location several systems away. Only then did Maya leave the controls to treat Jack's wounds. She cleaned and bandaged his injuries while scolding him for being reckless. Jack said it worked, did it not? Maya said next time he pulled something like that, she would shoot him herself. Jack said that was fair. They both laughed. It was the laugh of people who had survived something they should not have. The freed prisoners recovered in the shuttle's passenger area. Maya moved among them, offering food and water and comfort. Carlos from New Arizona recognized her. He asked if she was the Apache woman from the stories. Maya said yes. Carlos started crying. He said he had heard the stories while imprisoned. He said they gave him hope. He said other prisoners talked about the humans who fought slavers. He said it meant they were not forgotten. Maya knelt beside him. She said no human would ever be forgotten. She said their people were coming for all of them. She said the slavers were learning that humans protected their own. Carlos nodded and wiped his tears. He said he wanted to help. He said when he was strong again, he would join the fight. Maya told him to heal first. There would be time for fighting later. Jack piloted them to New Providence, where Danny's militia waited. Danny's people took the freed prisoners and began treatment and processing. Danny pulled Jack aside and asked how many operations they had run now. Jack counted in his head. This was number 14. 14 slaver locations hit. Nearly 200 prisoners freed. 6 of them from New Arizona. Danny whistled low. He said Jack and Maya were doing more damage to the slave trade than entire governments. Jack said it was not enough. There were still missing people from New Arizona. There were thousands of humans enslaved throughout the sector. He and Maya were just 2 people. They needed more help. Danny said his militia was growing. Other colonies were forming their own groups. The success Jack and Maya were having inspired others. Word was spreading that humans would fight back. Maya joined them and Danny repeated what he told Jack. He said their actions were changing things. The Krell Dominion had issued a bounty on both of them. Other slaver species were avoiding human colonies. Some were releasing human prisoners rather than risk being targeted. Maya said that was good but not good enough. They would not stop until every human was free and every slaver was afraid. Danny offered them resources, ships, weapons, personnel. He said his militia wanted to coordinate with them, run larger operations, hit bigger targets. Jack looked at Maya. She nodded. They agreed. Working together, they could accomplish more. They could hurt the slavers where it mattered most. Over the following months, the operations grew larger. Jack and Maya led strike teams hitting slaver strongholds. They freed hundreds of prisoners. They destroyed slave markets and killed or captured slaver leaders. Their names became known throughout the sector. Humans spoke them with pride. Slavers spoke them with fear. The phrase Maya spoke to Zarth became a rallying cry. I would rather die than be yours. Freed prisoners carried it back to their homes. It appeared on banners and signs. It was painted on ships and buildings. It represented human defiance. It said that humans valued freedom above all else, that they would fight to the death rather than be enslaved. 1 year after her rescue, Maya stood on the bridge of a militia ship watching an attack on a Krell slave depot. 20 ships participated in the assault. Hundreds of militia members fought alongside her. It was no longer just her and Jack, it was a movement. Below on the station, slaves were being freed and slavers were being killed. Justice was being served. Jack joined her at the window. His shoulder had healed, but he moved a bit stiffly. He said it looked like they started something. Maya agreed. She said her grandmother would be proud. Her people had fought for freedom for generations. Now Maya was continuing that fight among the stars. Jack said all of humanity should be proud. They had gone from scattered colonies to a unified force in just 1 year. The attack on the depot was successful. Over 300 prisoners were freed. Among them was another person from New Arizona, a teenage girl named Sophie.